same time, I'd just like to give an off-time blanket thanks everyone for being here, to my opponents, my partners, and my judge. So with that, I'll begin my case. Thank you. My partner and I stand firm in affirmation for the motion that the United States should suspend all assistance to Pakistan. We plan to return this suspended aid to Pakistan once the war on terror is fully over and when the U.S. is completely out of the recession. We begin our case with contention 1. Pakistan doesn't want the aid. Assistance of any sort should only be dealt out to those who need the assistance. Now, the U.S. is assisting Pakistan when they don't want or even need our aid to stand on their own 2 feet. According to Isam Ahmad, quote, Pakistan's army said Monday that U.S. military aid cut worth some $800 million won't affect its ability to conduct combat operations, end quote. So clearly we can see that Pakistan not only doesn't want our help, but they don't need it to function. The impact of this is that the U.S. is funneling resources into a program that isn't benefiting either party. At this point, the only option is to cut the aid. Contention 2. Assistance doesn't achieve U.S. goals. At its current state, the U.S. is at war with Afghanistan, and we need every last advantage that they can get. What the U.S. doesn't know is where their assistance to Pakistan is really going. According to Quinton Somerville, quote, the report says the Taliban are helped by Pakistan's security service, end quote. So when we can see that while we are aiding Pakistan, they are sharing the assistance with the Taliban, which the United States is currently at war with. This impacts the United States unintentionally hurting itself in war on terror. Now that this terrible mistake has been discovered, it is clear that it's the right time to suspend the aid, to suspend the assistance until the war on terror is over. Moving on to contention 3. We need the money at home. As we all know, the United States doesn't have extra money floating around to spend on other countries. Instead, we're actually in a recession. That means all of our assistance we give must be only if it's necessary. The U.S. handed out more than $1.5 billion last year, and now, according to the Enhanced Partnership of Pakistan Act of 2009, the United States is expected to deal out more than usual. When you compare the average teacher salary, we see it lays out around $40,000. That means that the U.S. is essentially laying off more than 37,500 teachers a year to fund Pakistan. Because we have shown you that Pakistan doesn't even want or need our assistance, it only makes sense to suspend the funding until the U.S. is entirely pulled out of the recession. Contention 4. Other countries will step in if needed. So, Judge, if the negation may stand up and tell you that Pakistan really needs our aid and things like that. Even though things alike. And even though we have already proven to you that Pakistan doesn't need our aid, if they did need it, other countries have enough money. Other countries with enough money would be able to fund Pakistan. We have observed that, quote, Pakistan facing a crisis with the United States has leaned closely to a long-time partner of China, offering its, quote, all-wealthier friendship with Beijing as an alternative to Washington, end quote. And also, quote, while China does not welcome U.S. presence near its border, it wants stability on the western flank, believes that abrupt withdrawal supporting of Washington's assistance to Pakistan would imperial that, end quote. So we can see that not only is Pakistan already looking to China, but China has motives to assist Pakistan. This essentially means that the U.S. can pull out now and return later with no worries. When analyzing the situation with Pakistan, we can see that they don't want or even need U.S. assistance. That the assistance is getting in the way of the U.S. goals. That we don't have enough money and that other countries will step in to help Pakistan, causing no harm. So, Judge, if you're in favor of saving jobs of 37,500 teachers a year without harming Pakistan, I see nothing but a pro ballot. Thank you for your time.
3 seconds.
I know, I'm a boss.
That's good.
Thanks. It could be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Before I start my time, I'd like to thank everyone in the room, my partner, the affirmation team, the judge for making this possible. And also the word mapping, I'm going to go over the negations case for today's debate. Alright, let's get started. As a negation team, we further argue that resolve. The United States should suspend all assistance to Pakistan. As a negation team, we'd like to provide the following definition since the affirmation has failed this burden. Suspend, to come to a stop temporarily, and assistance to help and support. We believe the judging criteria should be net benefits to both the United States and Pakistan. As a negation team, we also believe the affirmation has a large burden to uphold in today's debate. Since the motion states that all assistance should be suspended in Pakistan, the affirmation must prove that every sort of assistance should be suspended. An additional burden that should also be placed on the affirmation team is to the word suspend. The affirmation team must show why only the assistance should be stopped, but why it should be set in place after a period of time. In addition, I also have to clarify that the negation team is not supporting the idea that all assistance to Pakistan should be kept. We negate that all assistance should be cut, but we believe that humanitarian aid should stay. Both teams can easily agree that military spending is something that needs to be cut from Pakistan's aid because being misused completely is utterly ineffective. Any of the affirmation's points can be turned towards the negation's case for this very reason. And with that, we move into our contentions. Contention 1, loss of UN aid. Subpoint A. With simple analysis, one can find that if this motion is true, for a temporary suspension, the UN Security Council will be unable to pass any motions pertaining to Pakistan. Since the United States is one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, it has the power to veto any substantive resolution. If all assistance to Pakistan is to be postponed, it is during that period that any international peace, security, or possibly large amounts of humanitarian aid in the wake of a disaster involving Pakistan cannot be maintained, since this would be a form of assistance. Subpoint B. While the UN Security Council was originally founded to control fights between countries and attacks of world peace, the Security Council has recently become more and more interventionist. Quote, it has the power under the Charter to respond not only to acts of aggression and breaches of peace, but also to threats of peace. The UN Security Council has been willing to treat internal conflicts as presenting such threats. End quote. The impact of this is that a monumental opportunity cost and a possible loss of life. If there's a large disaster or any threat to large groups of human life, the UN Security Council will have no way to intervene like it has in the past. Contention 2. Humanitarian and civilian aid are extremely necessary. Subpoint A. Humanitarian aid to the people of Pakistan is incredibly necessary. Quote, almost a year since more than 3 million people fled the fighting in Pakistan's Swat Valley and surrounding areas, the crisis is far from over. Over 1 million people are displaced, more are being forced into displacement every day, and 2 million are struggling to rebuild their lives after returning to their homes to find their villages destroyed. The ability of humanitarian organizations to adequately respond is being hampered by the critical shortage of funds. End quote. Humanitarian aid is necessary to the people of Pakistan in order to survive and find homes in the aftermath of conflict. Subpoint B. Currently, the humanitarian aid that we give to Pakistan is essential to maintain good relations with the Pakistani people and government. Quote, we consider bilateral U.S. civilian assistance to be an important component of that relationship. I believe it can help Pakistan become a more prosperous, stable, and democratic state, with certain national interests of both the United States and Pakistan. End quote. So not only does the civilian aid that we give to Pakistan benefit Pakistani citizens, it can benefit the United States if there are any mistakes made by the U.S. government. Subpoint C. While many claim that the United States pays a large monetary cost to pay for Pakistan, there is no significant impact on that point. In 2009, the United States government gave Pakistan $162.1 million. Merely a percentage of this is humanitarian aid. In addition, this $162.1 million is only 0.0056% of our foreign aid overall, making it utterly insignificant in the face of the entirety of the United States spending and foreign aid. And it's for this reason I urge a vote in strong favor of the negation. Exact 4 minutes.
Nice. Good. All right, Ross?
Whew, yes.
All right. No time.
As the affirmation team, would you mind if I took the first question?
I wouldn't mind whatsoever.
Great. I'll begin time now.
1 second, hold on.
Hold on.
Yeah, okay.
I'll begin time now.
Okay.
So for the first question, I actually have one question about your burdens.
Yes.
You said that the affirmation team must prove that all aid must be stopped. However,
Stopped and then returned after a short period
yes,
of
I
time.
know. That's actually part of. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yes.
But you get to affirm by saying all but humanitarian aid should be stopped.
Yes.
Now, how is this at all giving anyone fair ground?
This is completely fair ground. We are arguing that humanitarian aid should be kept, while you are arguing that everything, including military aid and humanitarian aid, should be cut.
So the affirmation team has the burden of proving everything needs to be cut, but the negation gets to pick and choose what they want to be cut and what they don't want to be cut.
Well, look, Judge, we're not arguing that we should keep all aid. The motion states that the United States should suspend all assistance. We are negating this resolution. We're arguing that some of it should be cut. This includes military aid. This includes various aids
Judge,
to
my
government.
opponents are doing something really sneaky here, trying to manipulate you. So if you can choose to see that or not,
I'm
I
sorry,
think
Judge.
we've been spending a lot of time on
Obviously, you
this,
can
and I
see
think
that
it's
we are
time
still
we move on. Do you have a
resolution.
question?
Yes, I do. So I believe your first contention. Can I see your evidence on that point? I remember you stated something about combat aid.
I would love to read the quote and the citation for you.
Okay, I have a citation actually.
I will read you the citation, of course. Citation 1 for contention 1 is, yeah, here it is, sorry. Ahmad Islam, quote, Pakistan says it does not need U.S. military aid, end quote. It's the Christian Science Monitor, July 2011. It's last updated February 2012.
All right, actually, that answers my question. Do you have any questions further to ask?
I do, actually. Can you read me the tagline for your subpoint B, first contention?
Yes, I may. Our subpoint B for our first contention is that, actually I don't have a tagline for it, but I can read you over the contention once again.
Or can you just give me the premise of it?
Basically, just the premise of it is that the UN has become more and more interventionist over time, making them more likely to, if something bad does happen to Pakistan, they would intervene, but since the United States will not be giving assistance...
I understand what you're saying. Thank you. Do you have a question?
Actually, yes. Your second contention, you stated that U.S. aid is going to fund Pakistan. Exactly what type of aid is it supposed to be originally?
I'm sorry, what?
In your second contention, you stated that our money, the United States money, is going towards going towards the Taliban through the Pakistan. Exactly, what type of aid is this exactly?
I'm assuming military aid?
Yes, and so doesn't that contention fall overall? Since we're not talking about military, we're talking about we're as a negation team, we're advocating for the ending.
Well,
of
as the
military.
affirmation team, actually, we set a much broader range for this debate, and being as though my opponents have set a narrow range for only talking about humanitarian aid, I believe that it'd be beneficial on an educational level, which is what we're all here to do, is talk about educational things that we brought in today's debate and talk about all the
even
different sorts of
even
debates.
if you are saying that,
Do you disagree that today should be an educational debate?
I do agree that this should
You
be, and we
agree?
we do believe that this should be a.
Then wouldn't it be best to talk about all sorts of aid? Good job.
I'm going to be taking running prep.
Okay.
Okay, that's it.
You took 34.6 according to my clock. Oh, did we switch pens?
Alright. So everybody, thank you everyone for being here. Before I begin time, I'd just like to give an off-time roadmap. I will be addressing the burden given to us, and then I will be refuting the case given by the negation. So with that, I will begin time. Okay, so Judge, looking at the burdens, the opposing team gave us the burden that we need to show that all the systems should be suspended, and we will do that throughout our case in an extension that I'll give, and as well as the burden that we need to show in when we suspend the aid, that the aid has to come back, and we've already shown that mechanism in our case. And let me just grab a piece of evidence, Judge. So moving into their case, their first contention, subpoint A and subpoint B were basically the same. The point that they were trying to get through was that if there was a disaster, then the U.S. would not be able, and the UN would not be able to assist Pakistan. And this holds no impact whatsoever, because if you look at our fourth contention, we showed you that China is willing to step in. So if there was a disaster, China, which is their next door neighbor, would be able to step in much easier, actually, than the United States. So, like I said, their first contention holds no impact whatsoever. Moving on to their second contention, subpoint B, they said that, subpoint A, they said that humanitarian aid is necessary. And I will be covering this in my extension, and I'll bring that back up later. Moving on to subpoint B, establishes good relations. Basically, they were saying that if we give them humanitarian aid, we establish good relations with Pakistan. And if you were listening to my second contention, I showed you that Pakistan is actually funding the Taliban. And I can read you that evidence again. This comes from Quinton Somerville. It says that, quote, "A report says that the Taliban are helped by Pakistani security services." So what we can see is that there is funding from Pakistan to the Taliban. So there is no relation. You could, on the surface, say that, oh, maybe the United States and Pakistan are friends. But actually, no, they're not. Because the Pakistanis are funding the Taliban. Moving on to subpoint C is that there's a very little cost to humanitarian. And if you look at our second contention again, this humanitarian aid that we are giving them is immensely hurting us because the United States is funding this Taliban. So that I've already went off on that impact of that. So moving on to my extension. In my extension, this fulfills my burden, which was that we have to show all aid. In our case, we've shown you that military and financial aid should be suspended. So here is reasons to suspend humanitarian aid. This evidence comes from Nancy Birdsall, says that, quote, "Observers in Pakistan and in Washington identify the same set of weakness in its design and implement. Okay, moving on. No
Implementation.
One is what?
Implementation.
Implementation. No one is sure the United States is trying to accomplish in the development space because of a debilitating lack of transparency in the aid program. No one is even sure what the U.S. is doing. So what we can see is that while there may be some statistics of of humanitarian aid and of the impacts of that, we can see through this evidence that there's actually no one is quite sure where the U.S. is going and if this aid is even going in the current state. And the opposing team has failed to prove the humanitarian aid that is being funded to Pakistan at this current state. And that is the only type of aid we are analyzing when showing you that we should suspend it. So just going over one more time, we've fulfilled our burden. I have refuted their... Oh, and also my extension, like I said I would touch back up on, it null and voids their second contention, subpoint A. So with that, I always vote for the affirmation. Thank you.
By thanking my partner, my opponents, and my judge for being here today and making this debate possible. Alright, I'll begin. Alright, so, first off, in my opponent's case, their first contention was that Pakistan doesn't want our aid and that we're spending money on a program that doesn't have any benefit for them or for us. But like we said earlier, that's for the military aid that we're sending, and we would like to cut it down to only humanitarian aid, which makes their first contention completely irrelevant to the case. Their second contention was that they don't support like what we are looking for by sending the aid to them, but by cutting down on the to only the humanitarian aid, we're striving exactly what we want, trying to help people who are suffering in other regions. So, like my partner said in our second contention, quote, "Almost a year since more than 3 million people fled fighting in Pakistan's Swat Valley and surrounding areas, the crisis is far from over. Over 1 million people are displaced, more are being forced into displacement every day, and 2 million are struggling to rebuild their lives after returning to their homes and finding their villages destroyed. The ability of humanitarian organizations to adequately respond is being hampered by a critical shortage of funds." So by completely removing the funds, they're not going to have any humanitarian aid to support these people who are suffering. So we agree that we should cut down most of our aid because, like you said, we need more money in America to support our own people as well, but we can't just completely abandon them and leave them without support. Your third contention was that we need the money in America. So why? But
also in your case, you mentioned that we were planning on increasing the funds, so I was a little confused about that. You said that if we didn't cut the aid, that you would increase it. So I don't understand that, but we agree for the most part that we do need the money in America, but it isn't fair to people who are suffering from their own government to cut them off completely of humanitarian aid. And all right, in your fourth contention, you said that other countries will step in, but I have evidence that China and Iran are not willing to ally too closely. Quote, yet Beijing's willingness to take Islamabad more fully under its wing appears limited. The hesitation is rooted at least partly in China's concerns about the rise of Islamist extremism in Pakistan and some disappointment with progress in developing the Gwadar Port, which suffers from a poor road network and geographical isolation. The Chinese government reportedly is unlikely to place itself in the middle of any U.S.-Pakistani rift, nor has it shown any desire to replace Washington as Islamabad's primary foreign benefactor, end quote. So even if we left, you mentioned China as a possible alternate to us to help support them with humanitarian and other aid, but China and Iran are not willing to support them. And thank you very much.
You ready for the last one?
Yes.
As the affirmation, can I take the first question?
Yeah.
Great, we'll start time. So, looking over your refutations to our case, let's see. So, our first and second intentions, you basically said that you are only cutting down to humanitarian aid. So, in essence, don't you agree with our first and second intentions?
No, we're absorbing them into our case because they agree with our case as well.
So, my points agree with your case. So, does that mean you're advocating for the affirmation? How in the world do a negations point?
Because we're not advocating for the affirmation, we're negating the resolution, which is the United States should suspend all assistance to Pakistan. And because we do not agree that you should suspend.
Right, I understand. And so you're saying that you should suspend everything besides humanitarian aid. So that means our contention saying that we should suspend financial military aid, you are advocating for as well. So, looking at this, in essence, you have been providing evidence in your refutations to our first and second contentions, going towards the affirmation, and for that, I see nothing but a pro.
Well, that could be taken either way. You could be advocating for our case as well.
Okay, can we move on? Do you have a question?
Yes, I did. So, like I said, you mentioned in your third contention that we need the money in America, but then you said that if we didn't cut down, that we would be increasing the funds. Why would we increase the funds if we need the money so badly?
Oh, no, I think you misinterpreted the evidence. Actually, the evidence said that the United States is expected to increase funding. So, basically, I impacted that out to the fact that because the United States will be increasing that funding, that it is so much more detrimental to the United States, and that's just another reason why.
Why would they plan to
We just read evidence saying, so I'm not the person who wrote the evidence. I can't attest to that. So, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are you not ready to move on? Okay, so let's see. To our third contention, you refuted it saying that it isn't fair to Pakistan, and I'm a little confused. You're arguing for suspending financial aid in this refutation, but your approach is to not do so, so this is kind of a contradiction.
We agree that we should cut down aid that is, like you said, possibility could be used against us, but the people who we are funding by humanitarian aid, we're supporting the civilians who are also being abused by their own government. So we're supporting not the government who could potentially attack us, we're supporting the people who are being mistreated.
Okay, great, thank you. And also for our fourth contention, you refuted it with evidence. Can I see that evidence once Crossfire is over?
Of course.
Okay, we have 10 seconds left. Do you have a question?
All right.
Can I have that evidence?
Yeah.
So before I begin my speech today, I just wanted to do a quick blanket thanks again to everyone being here, and just an off-time roadmap. What I'll be doing is a little bit of housekeeping in today's debate. I'll just be picking up anything dropped, anything missed, and going over the main idea in today's debate. So with that, I will start my 2-minute speech. My first main idea is about dropped contentions. My opponents have dropped every single refutation my opponent has made to their case. Therefore, their case has no weight in today's debate. What I'd like to move on to now is the judging criteria, which wasn't pulled through by my opponents, also presented by my opponents, wasn't pulled throughout either the crossfires or my opponent's second speech. However, I will honor that because it is today's weighing mechanism in the debate. So my first contention, I'm going to be weighing each and every contention that my partner and I have against this judging criteria. So the first contention, it benefits, on our case, is that it benefits America because we're not wasting any more money. It benefits Pakistan because they won't be getting aid they don't want. Contention 2, net benefits to America would be that we're not aiding a terrorist group. Net benefits to Pakistan, they won't be caught in crossfire if anything happens with us, anything happens again with us in this terrorist group, because we'll have to knock out anyone who helped them. Moving on to contention 3, net benefits to America. It helps us get out of the recession, and net benefits to Pakistan. Again, other countries will go ahead and step in. Contention 4, net benefits to America. Again, it helps us get out of the recession. Net benefits to Pakistan. Again, other people are willing to step in and help them. Now that I've gone over the main points, I would just like to cover a couple of quick refutations and a couple of quick points that were also covered in today's debate. My opponents spoke that one of the refutations was that aid for military is not relevant. Now, what I'd like to point out is, I lost my train of thought. But what I'd like to point out is that when my opponent stood up here and said that we're not meeting the burdens, that we're not meeting some sort of burden, what I'd like to point out is that that awkward moment when you forget what you're going to say. What I'd like to point out is that my opponents keep saying that we're not meeting the burdens of what they have said. However, my opponents haven't actually said how we aren't meeting the burdens, just that we aren't meeting what their standard is, that we aren't meeting what they set for today's debate. And by burden, what I mean is they come up here and they present counter evidence. Sorry, that's what I meant. They come up here and they present counter evidence, yet they aren't saying how their evidence is better than ours or how ours is less than theirs. They just present counter evidence and expect you to make your own analysis. So with that, I thank you and urge to vote for the affirmation. That was really good until I forgot what I wanted to say.
We'll be taking a minute for time. Yeah. Okay. So a little bit of off-time road mapping. I'm going to address the claims brought up by the affirmation team, and then go over the negation team's case and re-strengthen it. Is everyone ready?
Yes, thank you.
All right, let's begin. So jumping right into the affirmation case, they have constantly been arguing in the second speech is that it's an unfair burden that we have placed as burden. It's unfair. Yet in the second affirmation speech, they came up and brought up a whole new contention, saying that was against humanitarian aid. And obviously, they do have the ability to argue against humanitarian aid. They have evidence for this. So obviously that point is null and void. The point does still stand. Moving into their case, which they say that we did not refute, but my partner actually did refute this, and her refutations haven't been attacked by the other team, and they claim that we haven't talked about their refutations, but we haven't had a speech yet to actually clarify that. I'll actually be going over that. So moving right in, their first contention was that Pakistan doesn't want aid, but this is actually combat aid that they're talking about. The humanitarian aid is what we're talking to keep, so that point is null and void. Their second contention is that Pakistan is actually helping the Taliban their evidence was not extremely shaky on this, but we are all still talking about humanitarian aid only. So that point is also null and void. The third contention is that we need the money at home, but as I pointed out in my second contention, subpoint C, this is 0.0056% of our entire foreign aid budget, which is also 1%. So it's 0.0056% of our 1%. This evidence has gone uncontested, so it's actually dropped. Moving into the fourth contention was that others will step in. Actually, the U.S., according to this evidence here, according to the OECD DAC, the U.S. For the past 10 years has been Pakistan's largest assistance, while in the top 10, China's not even on the list. Moving into our own contentions, they stated that our first contention was exactly the same disaster, that China would step in, but I've proven that China actually will not step in, and my partner has brought evidence to this as well. And also, these are not the same contentions. Our second contention, they stated that subpoint, our second contention, subpoint A, I'm actually out of time, so I urge a vote in favor of the negation.
Ready for Frost?
Yes.
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry, I forgot my second. As the affirmation team, do you mind taking the first
Give me
question?
1 second to set my timer, and I'll be ready.
Great. Ready?
As the affirmation, would like to take the first question.
Yes, I would. Thank you. I'll start time now.
Yes.
One of the questions I actually want to bring up, because it actually makes a big deal based on my first rebuttal, and yours. You said that you had to have a speech to actually go over our contentions, and I'd like to point out that your partner's speech, where she just refuted, all she did was refute our case, is actually the speech where she's supposed to refute our case and the refutation to make your case. If you would look at public forum rules
Did you look at our
speeches,
did you listen to my
excuse
speech?
me, I'm still talking, but if you look at public forums and speeches and how to do it, that's what it says in the rules. So,
Did you listen to my speech whatsoever? Because I went over...
I actually did listen to your speech, and you said we didn't have a speech to refute this.
Yes, and also later on, and I'm sorry you're getting a little bit emotional. I need you to calm down, please. I'm feeling a little bit threatened.
Oh,
But-
you're feeling threatened then.
Yes, I'm
Would
actually...
you like to take a minute to gather your...
Alright, so, just moving on. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to be aggressive myself, but I actually did go over your refutations.
Yes, you did in your rebuttal.
Yes, so why are you
Well, it
still
holds
bringing
no
this
weight
up?
because now we don't have any chance to refute that.
Well, okay, let's just move on to something else. So, moving on to your case, moving on to our burden that we set in this round. So, I'm sorry, I seem to have lost my train of
That's
thought.
okay.
Do you have a question that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, can I
My
clarify
partner
something?
does.
Yes.
So, you kept talking about these burdens and that we haven't met them, and you still have an argument for that.
Yes.
But I'm a little confused given the fact that I've said several times that we've met your burdens, and we have, in and of itself, met the burdens. Your first burden was that we needed to show that all assistance should be suspended, and with our case plus my extension, I have done so.
I'm sorry, I believe I phrased that wrong. I meant our look at today's debate, how we're looking only at how we're advocating for the keeping humanitarian aid, while your case, which is mainly focusing on military aid, we both agree on. We both agree that military aid should be stopped. That's what I was talking about, just to clarify. So, okay, so moving on to your third contention, you haven't actually brought this up or attacked this whatsoever, but in my second contention, subpoint C, I stated that 0.005% of our foreign aid is to Pakistan, and also this foreign aid overall is 1% of our entire U.S. budget. How can you justify that? How can you even justify that this is very significant whatsoever?
I'm sorry. What is that relevance? Can you restate the question for me, please?
Well, actually, are you refuting that contention now? Because
That's
your partner, when addressing this contention, didn't refute it. All she said was that she was confused because we said we were increasing the aid, and then I
actually,
clarified.
I actually
I
would really like to
understand.
move on because this looks like it's going to get confusing. So my question is mainly about your partner saying that we can't simply leave these countries without any support toward them. It's not time yet. Support toward them. Actually, according to public forum rules, you guys, I'm allowed to finish my speech. Just kidding.
How much prep do we have left?
You have like 30 seconds.
About 3 seconds, yeah. It's a little less than that. Do you want to begin?
Yeah, I know.
Oh.
Me too, yeah.
So once again, just thank you everyone for being here. And as my last speech, I'll just be giving 3 main voters of why we've clearly won today's debate as an affirmative. So, starting time now. My first voter is looking at our case. And if you look at our case, we had 4 strong contentions, and half of which, the first and the second, were not refuted, only saying that they were absorbed into the opponent's approach. And like I have said before, because the opponents are advocating to suspend the aid that we are advocating for, that is an affirmative contention and an affirmative argument. Therefore, we have won half of our case whatsoever. Moving on to my second voters, their case. And if you look at them as the negation, I have refuted all of their contentions, and we have shown you a lot of conflicting evidence. My partner weighed that out in her speech, so we have already shown you, and I have no further to do, is that we have won our evidence on basically the China will step in, and there was another piece of evidence too. I'm short on time, so moving on to my third voter is the judging criteria which they presented, which was net benefits, and to actually the United States and Pakistan. And my partner weighed this out, pulling our contentions apart 1 through 4, showing the net benefits to both parties. So we have won on their judging criteria alone. So just going back through this, we have won on our case because they have not fully refuted our first and second contentions, and we've weighed out the evidence. And moving on to and my second voter is their case. We've also weighed out the evidence. I have thoroughly refuted that. And then their judging criteria. And also just, once again, talking about the burdens. I know this has gone through a lot, but the burdens that we have met, and no argument can say differently, is that we have met the burden of showing a mechanism of when we are going to return the suspended aid, and the burden of showing that all assistance should be suspended. So with that, I urge a strong vote for the affirmative. Thank you.
We'll first take a minute part time. Okay.
Alright, so again, I'd like to begin my speech off time by thanking my partner, my opponents, and the judge for being here today and making this debate possible. Alright, so I'm going to begin with voters. So the first one is that their first, second, and third contentions advocate for our case as well, so they are irrelevant to this debate because they can be used on either side, and they haven't questioned our evidence for the points that could go either way, so therefore we win those points. The second voter would be that their fourth contention, we have refuted it thoroughly with that neither China nor Iran are willing to support them after we have taken away the aid. So you have said that China would be willing, but I showed evidence from the third voter would be that my partner has also strongly rebuilt our case after you made refutations against our case. So with evidence and So as you can see clearly, their case holds no weight in this debate because we have proved all their contentions are relevant because we are strongly advocating solely to keep humanitarian aid, and their fourth contention was refuted. So, thank you. Strongly urge your vote in the issue.
Okay.